I'm Olivia Clarke, editor of Chicago Lawyer Magazine and the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin, and we're going to be talking about professionalism today with Tina Martini and David Susler, the Inside Out columnists. Hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So, how would you define professionalism?
I would define professionalism as encompassing, it's the way a lawyer conducts themselves. I think lawyers, to be a professional means that lawyers actually have what I call fiduciary duty to society. And we have to conduct ourselves with the utmost of honesty, integrity, civility. We're officers of the court, and we have to respect that and portray conduct ourselves so that others see the importance and the sanctity of our profession.
And it goes beyond, especially in the legal profession, it really goes beyond just how you behave in the context of work. It's really how you live your life, especially in this social media world that we live in now. And I think a lot of folks who are the younger generation sometimes don't appreciate that if they're going to have a Facebook page, for example, you better be really careful what content you put up, because the professionalism goes beyond just the 9 to 5 or 9 to 8 job. It's really about how you conduct yourself in life.
We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but I think it's kind of worth bringing up again. I mean, what do you do when you're not met with someone who's equally professional? How do you deal with that?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is resist the temptation to lower yourself to their level. And we all have come across lawyers like that. And if you can, our instant reaction is, can be visceral, and you want to lash back, but you need to learn to resist that and just come up with something that stops them in their tracks. Say, look, and this is what I know, I've said this before, but it works, is in essence say, look, we're not going to play that game. We're not going to do it that way. You can be forceful, but still civil, and stop them in their tracks and change the course of the interaction.
I think sometimes people think that they can bully you, and I think there are certain people who don't see that they're being difficult or unprofessional, but I think there are some people who use it as a tactic, and I think you guys have to kind of feel your way through the situation and figure out which camp these folks are coming from. Because I'll sometimes, if I think someone's doing it intentionally, I'll say, well, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way, and I can be just as obnoxious as you are. And it's interesting because they don't expect that necessarily, especially if the conversation starts off where I'm being friendly and polite, and sometimes it kind of depends on where the person's coming from. But other times, and I think I mentioned this in the past, I'll say, well, if you're having a really bad day, we can have this conversation another time. And that's another way for them to think about whether they're going to recalibrate and adjust their approach. And then every once in a while you get someone who's just completely obnoxious, who no matter what you say or do, they just continue to be that way. And I agree with David, you don't really want to go down to their level, and I try to minimize contact. I'm always respectful. I always make sure that I do not stoop to being unprofessional, but I also try to minimize my contact with those types of people.
And certainly what will help in those situations, and I think this is part of professionalism as well, is that you need to be fully prepared. If you know your stuff, then no matter what they throw at you, it's much easier to remain calm in the face of the storm. You can kind of let them, okay, fine. If all else fails and then they just keep barraging you with their bullying or berating, I would just wait till I'm done and then say, well, okay, but here's the way it's really going to go. But you have to know your stuff, and that's part of being a professional, is being prepared, doing your best all the time.
What if your client isn't being professional? How do you deal with that?
It's not entirely different. There's always the politics. You have to understand that, and sometimes, you may just have to smile and take it. I mean, it's the same as if you're in court, I've been yelled at by judges. It's never fun. But sometimes you just have to wait until it's done and say, I understand, thank you, now let's consider this.
Usually, I mean, when I heard your question, I thought unprofessional in context of exhibiting being angry or being upset. And so what I try to do is I'll actually try to be very upfront and say, you sound upset or you sound angry. May I ask why? And I try to help them figure out, because sometimes they don't know why they're reacting that way, and sometimes oftentimes they'll apologize, because what happens is they're in the moment and they're angry and upset about the situation, but it has nothing to do with me, because it's just the situation that they've encountered, which they're asking me for help to get themselves out of. And so they actually will sometimes feel better, and that's sometimes where the whole therapeutic effect, almost like a quasi-therapist role that we have as advisors to clients, sometimes that's really what they need. And it's our responsibility to figure out if that's what they need in that moment. And oftentimes, that's, I guess, delivering great service is figuring out, does my client need legal advice? Does my client just need to vent? Do they need business advice? And just figuring out what the context is for that particular conversation.
And we talk about civility, and usually I think when people talk about it, it's civility between lawyers, but it holds in that context too. And if you conduct yourself as a professional, you are civil, and it's not fun to sit through those situations. But I think Tina gives a good example. It's not always easy to speak to a client that way necessarily, but again, you still have to respond civilly. And again, it depends on the relationship too. There may be times when you have a personal relationship, for example, underneath the client relationship, but you still have to remember which situation you're in, and I think Tina's response is a really good way to go.
Great. Well, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thank you all for watching, and next month we're going to be talking about client development.